The arrival at Earth's edge. Commander James "Jax" Carson stood at the helm of the sleek diplomatic cruiser, his gaze fixed intently on the holographic star maps that danced across the command console. The stars themselves seemed to flicker with anticipation, and the trajectory was set. Earth was just ahead, only a few hours away from arrival, and yet it felt like a lifetime. There was something undeniably mesmerizing about the idea of that world. Dangerous, raw, and wild. The calm before the storm, as it were. Beside him, Ambassador Zira of the Andara, a species known for their superior intellect and grace, gazed at the navigation screen with a mixture of disbelief and growing dread. Her lavender skin shimmered faintly in the dimmed lights of the ship's bridge, a sharp contrast against the soft blue glow of the holographic controls. Long strands of silver hair cascaded down her back, her delicate, ethereal beauty striking in the way the lights played upon her. Yet, despite her elegance, there was a nervous tension in her posture, a subtle tremor in the way her fingers gripped the edge of the console. Zira's eyes, a deep shade of violet, flicked nervously from the navigation display to Jax's confident figure. His hand was poised over the controls, relaxed, as though landing on a dangerous planet was as casual as a stroll through a park. The very thought of their destination, Earth, the most dangerous planet in the galaxy, was causing her considerable unease. "Commander," Zira's voice was soft, melodic, but there was an edge of fear in it. "This can't be correct, right? Earth? You're telling me this ship is heading straight for Earth?" Jax smiled, the corners of his lips curling upward in a way that was equal parts mischievous and amused. He leaned back into his captain's chair, the suit he wore, heavy, imposing, and built for war, sounding a quiet hum as he shifted his weight. His broad shoulders relaxed as his brown eyes twinkled with a gleam of mischief. It was clear he was enjoying her discomfort a bit more than he should. "That's right," he said with a touch of pride in his voice, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the console. "Destination Earth, and I'd recommend that you prepare yourself, Ambassador. I've heard it's a real eye-opener." Zira stared at him, her silver eyes widening in disbelief. She opened her mouth to speak, but closed it again, her voice faltering. Instead, she found herself muttering under her breath, "This is impossible." "You're acting like Earth's some kind of myth," Jax said, leaning forward, a hint of amusement still dancing in his expression. "But trust me, it's not. It's home to humanity, and I think you'll find it captivating." Zira's delicate features twisted with confusion and fear. She shook her head in disbelief, her flowing silver hair falling around her face as she turned away from him. Her robes, made from a material that shimmered as if woven from light itself, whispered against the floor of the bridge as she walked to the viewport. Outside, the endless void of space stretched on forever, dotted with distant stars. But Earth was close now, the swirling blue and green of its surface now clearly visible, a beacon in the black abyss. Zira's heart raced as she continued to stare out at the planet. No, this is a mistake. The archives are clear. Earth, it's classified as a death world, a planet so hostile that most species wouldn't survive even one full cycle on its surface. Her voice was trembling now, the horror of the planet's reputation becoming too much to ignore. Jax's chuckle was warm, rich with a confidence that only someone like him could exude. A death world. Sure, if you look at it from the wrong angle. The atmosphere's dense, sure, and the gravity. A bit intense, but that's what makes Earth unique. It's not about surviving, Ambassador, it's about thriving. The wild animals, the weather, the viruses, they all test you, make you stronger. And that's what makes us humans who we are. We embrace it all. Zira was pacing now, her long strides echoing through the bridge as her voice grew more frantic. The atmospheric pressure alone is enough to crush most species in seconds. The storms, the temperature fluctuations, what kind of place would allow life to evolve in such conditions? The wildlife, don't get me started on that. Predators, Microorganisms, insects, all evolved specifically to kill. How can you call this home? She turned to face Jax, her silver eyes now flashing with a mix of disbelief and fear. Jax met her gaze without hesitation, his expression one of quiet amusement mixed with something else, something that hinted at a deeper connection with the planet he called home. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers dancing over the controls once again. You're making it sound worse than it is, Ambassador. Sure, Earth's got its dangers, but it's home to the most adaptable, resilient species in the galaxy, humans. And I promise, we know how to survive, no matter what it throws at us. Zira scoffed, shaking her head. Survive? You mean to say, thrive? In this madness? Jax grinned, his brown eyes gleaming with something that looked suspiciously like pride. That's right, and we're going to show you just how well we do it. Besides, he added with a wink, you've got the best protection the United Earth Federation can offer. Zira frowned. Protection? That's not reassuring. Don't worry, Jax said, standing up from his chair, the heavy suit of armor he wore making a soft whirring sound as he adjusted. If anything goes wrong, you'll have me looking out for you. Zira crossed her arms, her posture tight with skepticism. I'm not sure that makes me feel better, she muttered under her breath. But Jax was already turning back to the console, his fingers moving with practiced ease as he navigated the final course corrections. You'll see soon enough. Earth's dangerous, yes, but humans. We're the most dangerous thing on it. A soft beep from the ship's computer broke the silence, announcing that they were nearing the edge of Earth's atmosphere. Zira glanced over at the navigation display again, her lavender skin now pale, almost translucent. Her fingers began to trace the intricate patterns on her hands, a nervous habit Jax had noticed throughout their journey. We're almost there, Jax said cheerfully, tapping a few more commands into the ship's control system. Welcome to humanity's playground, Ambassador. The ship began to vibrate, the air thickening as they approached the planet's atmosphere. Outside, Earth's surface was coming into full view, a swirling mass of clouds, oceans, and landmasses. Zira couldn't take her eyes off it. Despite her fear, despite the dangers that lay ahead, there was something incredibly magnetic about the planet. Something that spoke to the very heart of curiosity. Isn't it beautiful? Jax asked, his voice softening as he too gazed out the window. Zira opened her mouth, but words failed her. Instead, she whispered, almost to herself, it's terrifying. That's Earth, Jax said, his smile growing. It's beautiful, but it's dangerous. And that's what makes it worth exploring. With that, the ship's engines roared as it began its descent, and the journey into Earth's wild unknown began. The storm. As the diplomatic cruiser descended into Earth's atmosphere, the steady hum of the ship's engines was interrupted by the unsettling creaks and groans of its hull. Outside, the sky had turned a violent shade of gray, clouds swirling in chaotic patterns. The ship trembled under the strain of the atmosphere's thick air, its sleek design battling the pull of gravity with all the might of its advanced technology. But nothing could have prepared Ambassador Zira for what was coming next. Zira gripped the side of her seat tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. The view outside the window shifted rapidly as the ship tore through layers of thick clouds, the air pressure increasing and causing a dull, constant pressure in her head. Her lavender skin seemed to pulse slightly with the rising tension in the air, a biological reaction to the extreme conditions. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself, but nothing could shake the feeling of dread creeping up from her gut. We're entering the outer bands of the hurricane now. Jax's voice echoed across the bridge, calm and collected as ever. Buckle up, Ambassador. It's going to get bumpy. Zira glanced at the viewport just in time to witness a massive storm system below them. She had heard of Earth's weather, of course, but hearing about it and witnessing it firsthand were two very different things. The hurricane below was monstrous, its massive eye spreading for hundreds of kilometers, surrounded by spiraling winds that churned the atmosphere violently. The edges of the storm seemed to glow with an unnatural intensity as bolts of lightning cracked through the churning clouds, illuminating the dark chaos beneath. This is impossible," Zira whispered, almost breathless. "I've seen storms before, but nothing like this. How can anything live in such conditions?" Jax chuckled, his voice rich with the kind of pride only a human could have about their planet. "You'll get used to it. Earth's got a way of putting things into perspective. We survive in these conditions because we're adaptable. Nature throws everything it has at us, and we keep going." Zira was about to respond when the ship jolted suddenly, throwing her against her harness. A loud groan reverberated through the hull as the ship lurched and then dipped sharply, fighting against the fierce updrafts of the storm. Outside, the sky was a maelstrom of violent winds, sheets of rain, and lightning that flashed every few seconds, creating an eerie, almost unnatural light show. "Hang tight," Jax's voice called out once more, this time with a hint of excitement in it. "We're hitting the worst of it now." The ship shuddered again, as if it were being torn apart by the powerful forces of the storm. Zira's grip on her seat tightened as she braced herself for another hit. The turbulence was unlike anything she had ever felt, worse than any space storm, worse than any solar flares she'd experienced. Her stomach churned as they continued to plummet into the heart of the hurricane, the ship twisting and turning as it fought its way through the tempest. "This planet is insane," Zira muttered under her breath. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the spectacle outside. The storm was so massive, so wild, that it felt almost like a living, breathing entity. It seemed as if Earth itself was warning them away, daring them to survive. "You don't know the half of it," Jax said with a grin that Zira could hear in his voice, even though she couldn't see him at the moment. He was focused on the controls, his fingers moving with expert precision, guiding the ship through the oncoming gusts of wind. "But you're about to experience the most thrilling roller coaster ride of your life." Zira glared at him, half in disbelief and half in awe. "You call this a thrill?" Jax's voice remained upbeat. "You bet I do. Earth's storms are some of the most dangerous in the galaxy, but they're also a symbol of human resilience. We don't run from danger. We embrace it, adapt to it, and make it our own." Another violent shake rattled through the ship, followed by a burst of static as the communication system crackled to life. Ship sensors reporting Category 5 winds. The voice of the ship's AI announced, "Recommended course adjustment, 17 degrees east." "We're already making the adjustment," Jax replied, his fingers already typing in the new coordinates with uncanny speed. The storm outside was relentless, but he had an air of confidence that Zira couldn't deny. It was as if he were one with the storm, perfectly at ease as he steered them through the chaos. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from outside, followed by a flash of blinding light as lightning struck dangerously close to the ship. The bridge lights flickered for a moment, then steadied. The proximity alarms wailed in a high-pitched tone, signaling the near miss of another lightning strike. Zira's heart jumped, and she instinctively reached out for something to hold on to. But there was no way to escape the raw power of the storm that was shaking the very foundations of the ship. "That was close," Jax muttered under his breath, his voice still calm, even as the ship bucked and rocked with the turbulence. "But don't worry. We've got this under control." Zira, on the other hand, was far from convinced. "How do you even survive this? This world is so chaotic. It's as though the storm wants to destroy everything it touches." Jax smiled, but there was a certain somberness in his eyes as he glanced at the storm. "Yeah, that's Earth for you. Unpredictable, unforgiving. But it's home to humanity. And as much as it tries to kill us, we've learned to live with it. We're not afraid of it. We've tamed it in our own way." The ship's AI chimed again, its voice clear and professional. "Current altitude, 500 meters. The storm is growing in intensity. Recommend immediate course change." Jax's fingers flew across the console, and with a sharp turn of the controls, the ship lurched in a new direction. The sudden motion almost knocked Zira off her feet, but she quickly regained her balance, her mind racing to comprehend what was happening. "Hold tight, Ambassador," Jax warned. "We're almost through this. We just need to get through the eye of the storm." "Eye?" Zira echoed, a hint of panic creeping into her voice. "I thought the storm didn't have an eye." "What do you mean by that?" "Everything on Earth has a purpose," Jax explained, focusing intently on the controls. "The eye of the storm is the calmest part. If we can get through it, we'll have a smooth descent to the landing zone. It's a wild ride to get there, but once we're through the worst of it, it'll be worth it." Zira stared out the window, watching the tempest swirl around them. Even though she had heard of the planet's chaotic weather systems, witnessing it firsthand was an entirely different experience. The winds, the lightning, the sheer power of the storm, it was overwhelming. And yet, she couldn't help but admire the humans for their tenacity. They had conquered this madness, adapted to it in ways that seemed impossible. There was a resilience in them that she had never seen before, and it both terrified and intrigued her. "Maybe Earth isn't as crazy as it seems," Zira murmured, her voice softer now as she took in the storm with a newfound sense of awe. Jax gave her a quick glance, his grin widening. "I'm glad you're starting to see it that way. Just wait until you see what comes next." With the ship now braving the very heart of the storm, Zira could only hold on and wonder what new surprises Earth would throw their way. The planet was far more than she had imagined. Beautiful, dangerous, and wildly unpredictable. And in that moment, as they flew through the storm, she couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement at the thought of what was to come. Into the eye of the storm. The storm raged around them like a living, breathing creature, tearing at the very fabric of the cruiser as they pressed deeper into its heart. Lightning arced across the dark sky in violent bursts, painting the tumultuous clouds in ghostly flashes of blue and white. The wind howled like a predator stalking its prey, and the ship groaned under the strain, as though it were a fragile leaf being tossed in the turbulent winds of a violent river. Ambassador Zira, her lavender skin still pulsing with nervous energy, was pressed against the back of her seat, gripping the armrests so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Her eyes, usually calm and serene, were wide with terror as she watched the chaotic scene unfolding outside the ship. Despite her species' advanced technology and intellect, nothing could have prepared her for the raw intensity of Earth's storms. There was nothing like it anywhere in the galaxy. "Jax, this is madness," she breathed, her voice trembling as the ship shook violently under another gust of wind. "I can feel the storm trying to tear us apart. How can you even think of flying through this?" Jax, on the other hand, was completely at ease. His hands moved with practiced precision over the ship's control panel, fingers flicking across switches and dials with a level of skill only an experienced pilot could possess. His body was relaxed, the sharp edges of his battle armor clicking as he moved with the rhythm of the ship. "This is nothing," Jax replied with a grin, his voice laced with confidence. "This is Earth's natural order, Ambassador. It's how the planet tests us. And you know what? We humans, we thrive on this kind of chaos. We don't run from danger, we learn how to survive it." Zira couldn't help but feel a mixture of awe and disbelief. She had studied Earth for years, learned about its unique challenges, and understood its risks, but there was something about experiencing it firsthand that made everything seem so much more real. It wasn't just the violent weather, the monstrous hurricanes, or the unpredictable lightning. It was the resilience of the people who lived on this planet, people who faced these challenges every day and yet still managed to thrive. "I don't understand," Zira muttered under her breath, watching as the storm continued to lash at the ship. "How can anything survive in this? It's as if the entire planet is fighting back against us." Jax's grin softened, and he took a moment to glance over at her, his brown eyes filled with a strange mixture of understanding and pride. Earth isn't trying to kill us, Ambassador. It's just testing us. It's harsh, unpredictable, and sometimes it feels like we're outmatched. But that's why humans are the way we are. We've learned to adapt, to innovate, and to thrive. We've learned how to fight back against nature, not by overpowering it, but by understanding it, by becoming a part of it. As if on cue, the ship suddenly lurched, sending Zira's heart racing. The AI voice chimed in, calm and reassuring as ever, approaching the eye of the storm. Altitude steady at 250 meters. No further adjustments required. The eye, Zira repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Is that supposed to be calm? Jax's lips curled into a knowing smile. Exactly. It's the calmest part of the storm. Once we're through this, we'll have a much smoother ride down to the surface. But getting through it isn't easy. There's always turbulence, always resistance. But we'll make it. Zira couldn't decide whether to be relieved or more anxious. The idea of entering the eye of the storm was both strange and comforting, but she had heard stories of how the calm could be deceiving. The eye was no safe haven. It was just the pause before the storm's fury would return with even more intensity. As they approached the eye of the hurricane, the violent winds around them began to subside, the howling winds replaced by an eerie, almost unnatural silence. Zira let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Feeling the tension in her shoulders loosen slightly, she could now see the clear sky above them, a vast expanse of calm blue with wisps of clouds scattered around them. It's beautiful, she said in wonder, her voice softer now. I never expected it to be like this. Jax glanced over at her, his eyes glinting with a mix of satisfaction and amusement. The eye of the storm is a paradox. It's calm, serene even, but don't let it fool you. This is just the quiet before the chaos returns. Earth has a way of keeping you on your toes. As the ship glided into the eye of the storm, Zira could see the vastness of the storm system around them. The churning clouds stretched out for hundreds of kilometers in all directions, a swirling vortex of wind and rain. And yet, in the center, there was a surprising sense of peace, as if the ship were floating in a tranquil bubble surrounded by an ocean of chaos. We've reached the core, Jax announced, tapping a few commands into the control panel. Now we just need to hold course, and we'll be down on the ground soon enough. Zira nodded, her mind still racing as she processed everything. The chaos outside had quieted for the moment, but she knew that this calm would be short-lived. The storm would return with a vengeance once they left the eye. But what struck her most about this experience was not the overwhelming power of the storm or the ship's ability to withstand it. It was the calm assurance in Jax's demeanor. It was as though he was completely at peace, not just with the storm, but with Earth itself. You really do think differently about this planet, don't you? Zira asked, her voice thoughtful as she turned to face him. Jax's smile grew wider, more genuine now. Of course, Earth's unpredictable, wild, and dangerous. But that's exactly why I love it. This planet doesn't give us a choice. We have to adapt. We have to learn. And when we do, we come out stronger. That's something you don't find on every planet. Zira turned her gaze back to the viewport, her eyes lingering on the calm eye of the storm before it vanished behind them. For the first time since arriving, she began to see Earth in a new light. It was wild, dangerous, and beautiful in a way she had never imagined. It was a planet that refused to be tamed, but in that refusal lay its true power. As the ship began to descend further into the storm's outer bands, the violent winds picked up once more, but Zira felt strangely calm. She could feel the ship shaking, the turbulence increasing, but there was no panic in her chest. Jax was right. Humans didn't run from the storm. They embraced it. And for the first time, Zira felt like she might be able to, too. The ship descended into the depths of the storm, its path steady as the violent winds roared once again. But Zira, no longer overwhelmed by fear, watched in awe as they cut through the storm, heading toward Earth's surface. A new understanding had begun to bloom in her heart. Earth was not a place to fear. It was a place to be conquered. And maybe, just maybe, that was something worth learning from.